National Treasury has announced that it's reviewing as many as 60 grants for both municipalities and provinces. Deputy Finance Minister David Masondo made reference to this at the country's first Just Energy Transition Municipal Conference held earlier this week. The plan is to ensure that as municipalities invest in their localities, they do so with the Just Energy Transition as a major underpin to their work. And plans are also afoot to review municipalities' funding models, given their past reliance on revenues from the sale of electricity. I'm joined in studio by the Deputy Finance Minister, David Masondo. Technology let us down earlier, but he is here in studio. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thanks, Nompumelelo.
Great stuff. So just give us an overarching view of the importance of having the Just Energy Transition as an underpin to municipalities' finances and their investment in their localities.
Climate change and its negative consequences are real. We're seeing the number of droughts. We're seeing the number of floods destroying livelihoods, houses in many parts of the world in South Africa. And this has become a food security issue in that when we've got droughts, agriculture suffers. And as a consequence, we've got issues. So we've got to respond. And part of the response to that is to rethink how we finance municipalities in order for them to contribute towards helping us to deal with the negative consequences of climate change in a just manner.
So to that point about, revenue raising for municipalities, traditionally they've relied on electricity and to some other extent water as well. But, with IPPs and some private households deciding to move to renewable energy, of course, that means that their revenues are diminished. So what do the possible new funding models look like?
So that we are working with the municipalities on how we create new funding models for municipalities to generate revenue in the light of the fact that electricity is no longer going to be one of their major sources of revenue. But from the grant side, we are reviewing the National Electricity Program grant to allow municipalities to finance alternative energy technology, solar, so that they don't just rely on one source of energy, which has been Eskom. And in that way, they will contribute towards maintaining the pace of making sure that we decarbonize our economy, but we end load shedding forever.
Yeah. On the side of residents, people are struggling to pay their municipal bills, let alone everything else. So with the strategy that you've just outlined, do you think that it will help for municipalities to invest in the installation of, renewable energy all over the place, and then at the same time be better able to sort of mitigate what the charges that they levy against residents? Because, people can't keep on paying higher energy prices every year.
The technologies that generate alternative energy, those technologies are becoming cheaper and making it possible, affordable for us to have cheaper sources of energy. So that grant is an attempt to contribute in making sure that the cost of generating energy are lower, and that should also benefit the citizens.
We know that obviously as a municipality you'll have multiple sources of finance. You'll have the revenue that you raise, you'll have the grants from government, as well as debt. Debt is a real contender, but how do you ensure that municipalities are sensible in that process? Because we know that many are struggling to raise revenue to begin with, and if your revenue base is not that good, going out to the capital markets obviously is not so sensible. How do you get that balance right?
They need to grow their local economies, because as their local economies grow, it means there's a number of people, there's a lot of economic activities taking place in their own local spaces. The property tax and other forms of taxes, they will be able to tax those residents and generate more revenue. So for us, in addition to some of the grants that we're providing to municipalities, the critical thing that the municipalities should do is to grow their own local economies.
In the meantime, in terms of the just energy transition and the conversations that you were having earlier this week with local municipalities, what are the timelines for all of these initiatives that you're talking about? And when you talk about reviewing these grants to municipalities, what is the timeline in that regard?
I think by October, the minister will announce in detail some of these reforms insofar as our grant systems are concerned, and some of them will be announced in February when the minister announces the main budget. But already, Melelo, the policy framework that we've put in place enables municipalities to even go out in the market to borrow money for projects that will help the municipalities to contribute towards energy transition. For instance, green bonds, project finance, in which banks and other funders are willing to come in and say, City of Joburg, City Power, we're willing to lend you money, provided it's going to go into helping you to sort out energy issues in Johannesburg, as an example, and installing other alternative sources of energy. So funders are looking forward to those kind of projects, because many of them, they do have mandates from the shareholders that start investing in alternative sources of energy to decarbonize our economies in order to deal with the negative consequences of climate change, which has become an existential threat to human beings.
Indeed. Very quickly, Deputy Minister, just in terms of ensuring that the grants that you give to municipalities are used for, for the right purpose, how are you going to monitor that?
So we're working on the mechanism to make sure that there's transparency. When we transfer a grant to a municipality, we know and we are certain that this grant has been used for the intended purpose. It's not used or repurposed for other expenditures which are not part of the what the grant is meant for. So part of these reforms is to make sure that we follow through the money and we see that ultimately this money was spent for water, for electricity, for bulk infrastructure in a particular municipality. So accountability is going to be increased, and you can only have accountability if you can see what the money has been spent for.
That's right. We as South African citizens can't wait to see that in effect. Thank you so much, sir. That was David Masondo, Dr. David Masondo. He's the Deputy Finance Minister of South Africa.